This story is about how I made peace with my wife's baby daddy and how the two of us got revenge on her for messing with our lives. Before I tell you my story, let me just tell you that I'm doing 100 times better after getting rid of my ex-wife Abby. I got the house in primary custody of my son, which is a small miracle in and of itself. I'm even finding my footing in the dating game. I recently downloaded Tinder and Bumble. Granted, I am pretty old now, almost touching 46, but y'all gotta know that age is just a number. I never realized it before the divorce, but Abby's mindset and the way she used to make me feel were making me feel 30 years older than I am. While everything is rosy now, things definitely didn't feel like that before. Let me tell you about how I met Abby. I was always a bit socially awkward as a kid and tended to live in my own world. While I wasn't a complete loner, I was never really interested in relationships or settling down. I mostly stuck to my own small circle of friends. Looking back on a few interactions, I do think one or two people had a crush on me when I was younger, but I just didn't pick up on any hints. Although I don't consider it a big loss, I do think some experience would have helped me notice the red flags when I met Abby. I had a passion for engineering and devoted myself to academics for a long time. By the time I graduated high school, I had worked on research papers, filed a few patents, and made a lot of friends in the field of research. After college, I pursued a PhD in biotechnology and began to work as a professor. This was when I met Abby, since the two of us co-authored a paper together. Anyone who has worked in academia knows that the process of co-authoring a paper meant that we were in contact for months. Eventually, she came over to visit me in Pasadena, where my university was. From the get-go, Abby was really flirty, and when she told me that she was interested in transferring to Pasadena and working towards tenure, the casual spark between us began to feel like an option for a real relationship. One thing led to another, and we had a one-night stand. The morning after, I distinctly remember her telling me that she was interested in pursuing a relationship with me, but would have to settle things back in New Hampshire, where her current university was. So, the two of us decided to put the idea of being a couple on ice until everything could be put in line. So, I dove back into my work and the two of us kept in touch. However, everything fell out of line when I got a call from her a month later. "Josh, I know this is sudden, but I have something important to tell you. I'm pregnant." "What? How did you find out?" "Well, I had been feeling a bit strange and then I missed my periods. So I got a test done and, well, it came out positive." Oh my God, is it mine?" "Abby, what do we do?" "Well, I want to keep the baby. I was thinking that we could maybe explore co-parenting for a little while and then see whether a relationship works for us. Of course, things would be simpler if I was in Pasadena with you." "Josh, I know this is a lot to ask, but could you pull any strings for my position in your university?" "All right, I'll look into it. And Abby, no matter how it pans out, I'm here to help, okay? I'll be all. Thank you." I remember hanging up and having a whole breakdown. I couldn't focus on any of the lectures I was giving that day, and honestly, who could? I was going to be a father. My feelings towards Abby were definitely positive at the time, bordering on love, but I wasn't sure whether I could live with her as a family. Shoving those thoughts out of my mind at that time, I focused on the first step, making sure that we could co-parent together easily. While I had a few initial misgivings, I approached a tenured professor who I was close to and began to suggest the idea of taking Abby into our department. I was still pretty young for a professor at the time and wasn't part of the committee that reviewed Abby's application. However, I was well-liked and people respected the passion I had for my field, so my words definitely held sway. Sure enough, she got the job and I began to help her through the pregnancy. She didn't have much of a support system and didn't seem to have any connections with her old friends in New Hampshire, so I was the only person who could be there for her. I felt a lot of responsibility to make sure she was comfortable and the baby would arrive safely. By the time her due date arrived, I felt more confident about asking her to marry me and settle down. On the 18th of November, little JJ was born, and I fell in love with the kid at first sight. After that, we got married and things went downhill from there. It was almost as if the marriage changed Abby from Jekyll into Hyde. She became bossy and controlling. She would nitpick all my hobbies and even belittled my work. Of course, the two of us were also working hard to get tenure, and raising a child in the middle of it all wasn't easy. I found myself doing way more housework than my wife, and often feeling resentful because of it. Despite the unhappiness in our marriage, I remained committed to giving JJ the best life that I could. I was very lucky to have a support system in the way of my family and friends, otherwise I feel like that marriage could easily have sent me spiraling. As JJ got older and more independent, the cracks in our marriage started to show through even more. About 4 years ago, there was only one slot for tenure in our department, and the two of us would have to compete over it. I won't lie, if it was up to pure dedication and work done for the university, I would have gotten it. However, Abby used the logic that it benefits both of us to basically browbeat me out of the promotion. I know that it seems pathetic that I allowed that to happen, but I was genuinely stuck in a loop under this horrible woman. Just a short while after that, I began to suspect Abby of infidelity. She would often go off to research seminars. Yet my friends who attended the same seminar often told me that they didn't see my wife anywhere. Even though more evidence like this began to mount up, I doubted myself and never confronted Abby. At the same time, JJ and I had a stronger bond as I devoted a lot of my time to him. He had grown up to be an amazing, bright kid. I was so happy to be with him, and he enjoyed spending time with me. Of course, I'm not heartless enough to say that he didn't like Abby, but it felt like she wasn't that interested in him. Abby wasn't focused on his school, his hobbies, or anything really. I was pretty happy with the dynamic I had with my son, and I was honestly thinking of roughing it out with the marriage. At least until our son was a little older. Things all changed that fateful day. I had been feeling under the weather for a while and had taken the week off from lectures. Abby had an important seminar out of town and wasn't going to be at the house. JJ, bless his little heart, wanted to try and take care of me, but I sent him off to stay with my parents to ensure he didn't catch the bug either. While I was wrapped up in blankets and drinking soup, someone rang the doorbell. I hadn't been expecting any visitors and found myself looking at a young guy through my gate camera. He introduced himself as Harry, and I began to speak to him through the intercom. "Hey Harry, are you sure you haven't got the wrong house? I don't think we know you." "Yeah, I don't think you know me personally, sir. But I used to know Abby. She was my professor, and maybe it would be best if we sat down and talked about it." "I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, buddy. Can you tell me what this is about?" Harry seemed to consider this for a minute, fidgeting on the spot. He took something out of his pocket and then said one sentence that changed my life forever. "Josh, this is about your son. I think I might be the father." Then he held up a picture on his phone, a picture of JJ when he was born. It was from the hospital, and definitely not something a scammer could have scraped off the internet. I need a minute." "You can come in. I'll buzz you in." With that, I met JJ's real father. Here's his side of the story. Apparently, Harry was a student of Abby's at her old university. I guess he had a crush on her, and Abby seemed to reciprocate his feelings. Obviously, it would be taboo for the two of them to date, so they were very hush-hush about the whole thing. Abby got pregnant, and the two of them freaked out. However, Harry was adamant that he would raise the child and do his best as a father. He told me that Abby wanted to end the relationship and move on like nothing ever happened, but that would mean that he wouldn't be able to be a part of his son's life. As they kept fighting about the pregnancy, Abby used her power within the university to get Harry suspended for alleged plagiarism. It was really messy and ruined his career. At the same time, gossip began to spread about the baby, and her relationship with Harry was slowly being uncovered. In one stroke, it seems like Abby got Harry's degree dissolved, began her path of switching universities, and fooled me into thinking JJ was my kid. After all this happened, Harry had to work minimum wage just to survive, and his hopes of working in academia were ruined. He eventually began working in a private company as a manager, but working in research isn't ever going to happen for him. I still can't fathom how someone could have been so cruel. Anyhow, the reason he has that picture is because Abby had a moment of sympathy. Maybe sympathy was too strong a word. Basically, despite going completely no contact, Harry had still been trying to reach out to people in her social circle who knew the full story. A lot of them took his side, and while they didn't outrightly call Abby out for her behavior, they kept trying to create a chance for Harry to meet his son. I guess that may have also been part of the reason Abby moved away from New Hampshire. The fact that she wasn't close with her old circle also made sense to me now. After the pregnancy, she had texted him to let him know the baby was healthy and that he would be raised well. After that, she told him that he shouldn't contact her at all, with dire consequences if he did so. After all the hurt that Abby had already inflicted on him, I guess Harry wasn't willing to take chances. "You never once suspected that JJ wasn't yours?" "No, not at all. I can't believe that someone would do this." "I thought you might say that. We can do a DNA test too. I'm really sorry if all this was too much for you." "Yeah, it is. But it's good to know." After we got married, Abby began to act differently. Almost as if she had been putting on an act until then. I've been with her for JJ, but I don't know what to tell you, Josh. She ruined my life and right now she's using you. A lot of things began to fall into place now. I was a candidate for Abby. I got her into my university. She made sure that I wouldn't compete with her for tenure, and she basically abandoned JJ in spirit. I began to look at the signs and realized just how little she spoke about her son or cared about what he was up to. After we spoke, Harry asked if he could see JJ, but I declined. I didn't want the poor kid to feel overwhelmed. Harry understood the situation and told me that he was going to go back to LA in a few weeks. He didn't have a lot of savings and was worried about what would happen if Abby found out that he had told me the truth. I've thought a lot about my reaction to the situation, but something that sticks out to me is just how much I loved JJ and how little Harry's revelation impacted that. That's not to say it didn't impact me at all, just that it was more anger and disgust with my wife. My kid was still my kid. He wasn't to blame for everything his mother had done. I took down Harry's details and asked him to lie low. The two of us didn't know each other very well, but it seemed like we were going to be united by a common goal, bringing Abby's house of cards tumbling down around her. After he left, I was stewing in my feelings for a few days. By the time I had recovered physically, I was feeling torn up mentally. I quickly realized that I wouldn't be able to deal with all these feelings by myself. At the same time, I couldn't think of who I should confide in. Eventually, I decided to let my parents in on the story. This was because my mom and dad did have some inklings about the troubles in my marriage, and they loved JJ too. I also needed someone to help me think about this whole thing rationally, because my first instinct was simply confronting Abby and divorcing her. The issue with that train of thought, as I realized after thinking about it a little, was that Abby had planned her whole agenda really carefully. By now, she had enough sway in my university to mess with me professionally. As for custody, I would guarantee that she would get custody since she's the biological mother of JJ. It was really important for me to stay in touch with JJ, and from everything I had learned about my wife, I could easily imagine her keeping him away from me out of pure spite. Lastly, I wanted to figure out a way to help Harry. Although we had only spoken once that day, I could see that the poor guy looked 10 years older than his age. I mean, who could blame him? He had a kid he was forced to stay away from, and his career was ruined before it even began. I cut JJ's visit to his grandparents short with a quick visit to my mom and dad. While my kid was playing in the living room, I quickly explained the situation to my parents. They were incredulous and genuinely believed that I had lost my senses. I finally convinced them by showing my chats with Harry. They were both flabbergasted, and for good reason. It's wild to think that someone could be so cold and calculated about marrying someone. I was an object of convenience for her. I guess Abby did love JJ in her own way, but she definitely didn't work towards showing him that he was loved too. My parents both agreed that I would need to figure out a way to get myself and my son out of this mess. I told them that I would speak to Harry and figure something out. To be honest, I was still confused about how I could move forward with a plan. After these two events, speaking to Harry and confiding in my parents, there was a bit of a gap until my next move. Abby came back from her seminar and I had to pretend like everything was okay around her, despite feeling like I was walking on eggshells 24/7. I had decided that it would be better to feign ignorance until I knew how I could bring her down. My first thought was to try and go for a no-fault divorce. In California, that's usually the norm, and I guess Abby wasn't exactly happy with me now that my usefulness had run out. I mean, she had tenure and had settled into the city. I spoke to her about it, but it didn't go well. Ha. You have to be joking, right? No, Abby, you have to see where we are right now. It's not good for either of us. All marriages have some element of sacrifice. We started because you got me pregnant. Let's just stick through it. I'm just saying, Abby. If you want to end the relationship, I would be more than happy to have custody of JJ. I mean, what's that supposed to mean? Do you think that I'm not caring enough for the kid? I'm telling you right now, Josh, I'm going to get custody and there's no two ways about it. I need to be with JJ. What would people say if I gave up custody? People would talk about me behind my back and my life would be ruined. Abby's insistence on staying together meant that I would have to fight in court for JJ's custody. From all our fights, I figured out that she didn't even care about custody It was a matter of pride and social standing for her. My opinion of her couldn't have gone any further down, but it somehow did after I figured that she only looked at her son as an accessory. I began to research the laws around getting a private investigator. I knew this wasn't going to be like an episode of CSI, where I could file for divorce and bring in evidence willy-nilly. I found out that a PI could be used to legally find information on everything Abby did in a public space. At the same time, I began to be really careful about gathering all our texts and chats. Every time she texted me about trips and work, I gathered it all and corroborated the date. Hell, I didn't even pay the PI from our joint account. I transferred the amount to my dad and he paid for it. All of this seems very clinical, but after hearing about how badly Abby had screwed JJ's bio dad over, I didn't want to leave a single stone unturned. While Harry had gone back to the East Coast after Abby returned, I kept in touch with him through text and calls. I let him know about my plan. I've been thinking about how we can make Abby pay for all her BS. I spoke to a PI too, and he thinks that Abby would be careless about her life. I mean, she doesn't know that you've spoken to me, right? Besides, I've begun to suspect that she's been sleeping around. A PI should be able to find evidence for that without any issue. That'll help me during the divorce. Yeah, that's true, she doesn't really have a clue. But how would we ensure that you get custody of JJ? Here's the thing. Even if we can prove Abby's terrible actions and infidelity, I'm not sure whether I would get full custody. I do have an idea ... but I'm not happy about it. What's that? Well, I could confront Abby. I guess if I can push her to blow up in public, it would be enough for your PI to record. Maybe I could text her and pretend like I was about to show up at your university and throw a fit. Aren't you worried about what she can do? No, I guess I've realized that I was giving her too much power. I know how much lying and scheming she did to get me expelled, but now, I don't think she can really mess up my life. Besides, I know that JJ would be in safe hands if I go through with this. So you're saying we should plan a way to get Abby to blow her top? Ain't. It could work. I mean, she doesn't know that we're in touch with each other, right? Harry's idea did seem like a stroke of genius. Having Abby publicly talk about the pregnancy would help us with witnesses, and my PI had ample evidence of Abby's infidelity that would work in court. As an extra precaution, he suggested that I plan a trip out of town, and he monitored the house. Sure enough, a strange car was parked in the driveway just a couple of days after I was gone. After JJ left for school, this affair partner would show up, and then they would drive away together after a few hours. It made me sick to my stomach. If there was any solace at that time, it was that I felt confident that a judge would feel similarly disgusted. The next step of the plan lay with Harry. The two of us knew that Abby cared a lot about public opinion, and Harry ended up faking an application to be on dr.phil. It was a shaky foundation, but we were hoping that Abby would be so shocked by Harry reaching out to her that she wouldn't question things too much. During this whole time, I tried to keep JJ as happy as possible. Kids are pretty mature and pick up on a lot more than we think. Even though he didn't really know what was going on, JJ could tell that Abby and I weren't really together. And he was learning a lot about relationships. I remember once he came up to me and told me just how much he enjoyed hanging out with me when Mommy was away. I don't know why, it's always stuck with me. Getting back to Harry, he texted me it's done after calling Abby. Just a moment after the text, I saw Abby come out of her home office, her face as white as a sheet. This was where I had my fun, watching her squirm. Everything all right, babe? Oh, yeah. Listen, one of my old students reached out to me. He was in town and wanted to catch up. You don't mind, right? No, not at all. I hope you have fun. With that, she went off to meet Harry. As for me, I sat down with JJ and finally told him a little bit of the truth. I didn't know how to break the fact that he wasn't my real son in whatever definition real exists, but I did tell him that I was going to split up with Abby. He seemed to understand and asked if he could come with me, as I was going to my parents' place for the week. I left the divorce papers on the coffee table. About an hour after I had reached my parents, I got a call from Harry. You won't believe what happened. Did it go well? More than well. I started off by telling Abby that I wanted to speak to JJJ. I felt like he deserved to know the truth. These were real, genuine feelings. I can't begin to tell you, man, how good it feels to get it all out of my system. I've been holding on to it for 10 years. That's wonderful. How did she react to all of this? Well, not well. She immediately responded in that weird kind of whisper scream that people do when they're trying not to shout. She threatened to lie to the cops about my mental state, like I was going to be a threat to JJ or something. Did you bring up going public? Yeah, I told her that I was going to go on a TV show and get a paternity test done. I pretended like I hadn't reached out to you just yet. Abby just lost it. I mean, she screamed at me, started cursing you out, JJ out, it was horrible. I feel kind of bad. It's who she is. The ugliness came out, that's all. I guess so. People were recording the whole thing on their phones. By the time she realized, it must have gone all over the internet. She left in a hurry. I explained the situation to a few people who were recorded and took their numbers. A couple of people were hesitant to get involved, but one girl said that she wanted to hear the full story and help us as a witness if needed. In one meeting, Abby had shown her true colors. A couple of hours after the call with Harry, my phone blew up with texts from her. She even called the police to my parents' house, allegedly for kidnapping JJ. I prepared myself for a long and hard custody battle. I won't bore you with the details, but the divorce proceedings went on for almost a year. During this time, the woman who had agreed to be our witness also turned out to be an amateur blogger of sorts. She interviewed me and Harry about the absurdity of the situation with JJ's identity hidden, of course, and I guess word got to the university. Abby was ostracized and people turned against her. I wasn't the least bit sad to see it happen, though. A few months ago, she took off from our home, well, hers, I wasn't living there, and avoided all summons to the court for finalizing our custody and alimony. Around the same time, an audit at the university also uncovered something that ruined Abby professionally. She had been skimming money from research grants. I guess her disappearance had more to do with getting caught in the audit than anything else. In a way, it was a silver lining. Although I was interviewed by the university and the police, it was pretty clear I had no idea about Abby's crime. Since she basically left me and JJ, the judge obviously viewed it as abandonment, and I was given full custody of my son. To this day, we don't really know where Abby is, but the last time I checked in with the police, they were under the impression that she had gone away to South America, as she was last spotted at the El Paso airport. This story does have a happy ending, but life is still complicated. I've gotten tenure and a nice boost in job security. People in the university did gossip about everything that happened, but everyone was pretty sympathetic toward me. Right now, a big issue is the shared finances with my ex-wife. There's still a bit of a mess, and the banks aren't really helping with the whole affair. Whatever the situation may be, my parents are both super supportive, and it feels nice to not wake up with an unease about the woman I'm with. Speaking of which, I'm back in the dating game, yes, but my priority is my son. JJ obviously had a tough time at first. He had to adjust to the process of divorce and getting introduced to Harry. Harry and JJ have been hanging out recently, and the two of them get along really well. I've also gotten to know the guy better, and I think he's been in a lot of pain for the last 10 years. We're not going to hide the truth about his parenthood from him, but I'm waiting until the kid grows up a little before I tell him everything that happened. I've also let him know that it's okay to miss his mom, and he shouldn't feel like he has to pick sides. Interestingly, JJ himself doesn't seem too bothered about where Abby is and what she is doing. I guess when you don't take an interest in your son doesn't really take an interest in you. Apart from all that, life just feels better. I'm finally letting myself acknowledge that I've been through a lot of lying, cheating, and manipulation. It may be petty, but I can't help but smirk at the fact that Abby was so big-headed that she thought she could control everyone in her life. How it all came crashing down.